you. So try not to make it perfect. So.
Speaking of redefining, let's talk about redefining roles. I kind of want to talk about times at a point in your career where you might have had to pivot, where maybe things weren't going so hot, or you came to a point in your career where it was time for you to change up what you did, and how exactly you did it. You know what? Let's start with Dr. Rosa.
Yeah. Well, I think what maybe my pivot was when I'm from Puerto Rico. You can notice in my beautiful accent. And when I was working for GlaxoSmithKline, it was SmithKline Beecham in Puerto Rico. I was given a great opportunity to go to England supposedly for a year. And during that time, I took care of my mom all my life until she passed 10 years ago. And many of people around me told me not to go. They said, you're crazy, you're going to leave Puerto Rico, it's going to be very different in England, your mom is sick. They gave me all these reasons why this was not the right thing to do. It was going back to my passion. So I defined whatever people told me. I said, I'm just going to take a jump. I'm going to go. And what will be the worst thing that will happen to me? Even if I'm there a single year, things are tough, I will learn to work with different cultures, the British versus the Puerto Rican, the very big difference, how the colors we dress, even distance. So I think for me, you need to keep redefining what you believe, and you need to stick to your guns. So you need to believe that when you think this is something that you must do, you need to trust your intuition, and if you work hard at it, you will continue learning, and great things can happen to you. So I was there for 4 instead of 1, and I even did my master's degree there. So I redefined the odds by just believing in myself. So it was not easy. The first year was very hard, but I won't be here today if I will have listened to all the voices of it cannot be done.
It's interesting. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I got out of high school, and I didn't go the traditional route around. But I worked for it's going to date me. I worked for a company called Tandy Corporation, and Tandy used to own lots of other companies, and I worked around. This is back in '86, '87. Technology was relatively new. But I was around the technology portion, but also a lot of people, customer service. We had a lot of accounts with some large retailers at the time, and I found that I was going out there and enjoyed that. And I was like, this is okay. Maybe this is something I want to do, but I wasn't really convinced. So I went to Dell Tech, and I started going around programming, and started taking a couple programming jobs, and realized absolutely programming, development. There's people that are good at it. I looked at the people that were around me. They got it. I had no idea what I was doing. And I realized, that's not for me. It was to be able to articulate technology and bring that to, disseminate all the, bunculators and tachyons, and then take that and move it into, another audience and be able to, be the Rosetta Stone. And I found that that's really where I was passionate, where I was able to be in front of people, but also moving in front of what was happening on the technology side.
So I have pivoted a couple of times, and I don't think I'm done yet. And I think pivoting can be a great thing. I think, as I was saying earlier, that it used to be that you went to school and you went to work in a career, and you stayed there for your whole career, this flat line, and then you got to this cliff and you retired. And I think the statistics these days are that you'll change jobs, every 5 to 7 years or something like that. I don't know if that's the current statistic or not. But I think that taking risks, strategic risk and calculated risk can be a really great thing. My first pivot was when it was at the end of 2003, when a business line that I was managing at the bank was eliminated. And this is something that we talked about. It wasn't as though I came in one day and I had a pink slip because my job was eliminated. That my boss and I had been talking about what the transition was going to look like. And at the end of the day, when I looked at the job description in early 2004, I knew I wasn't going to be happy. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And if I accepted that position, it was only because I needed a job while I looked for another job. And I went back to my boss and I said, this isn't going to do anybody any good because eventually I'm going to leave. I had an opportunity to stick around. I could look for another position internally, which I did. And finally, it was a couple months later. Normally you get kicked to the curb, but it was about 2 months later. And I went back to my boss and I said, I've transitioned these files to this person. I've trained this person to do this. I've scheduled my exit interview. And at that point, he looked at me and he was just shocked. And he said, "You're leaving?" And I said, "Jim," and we had a great relationship. I said, "Jim, I've been telling you for weeks and weeks, I'm leaving." And I left, and I didn't have a job to go to. So again, you've got to make a calculated risk. It's not always easy to do, and certainly from a financial perspective. But it was the best thing I ever did because I discovered these entrepreneurial and creative thinking skills that I didn't know had existed, and design skills and networking skills, lots of fun stuff. And had I not taken the risk of saying no to that position, I would never have discovered the talents that I had within me, the creative talents. So paychecks are important, but they're not everything.
I'm just going to echo what she said. Paychecks are important, but they're definitely not everything. And sometimes you have to take some time and just kind of assess who you are, what you love about where you are, and then start to kind of explore other opportunities. One of the things that I did when I first started working in the Senate 14 years ago, I had no idea. If people said, "Tish, what do you want to do next?" I don't know. And that was generally my answer for everything. I don't know. I'm just happy to be here. And then at some point, you realize you're not happy to be here anymore. And so it's, okay, what's next? And you start to look at what everyone else is doing in the office and picking out, okay, I would like to do that, or I would like to do that. Or it might not be in your office, it might be someone else. And then you start to explore what they're doing. So every pivot that I made after that point, it was, as she said, calculated, and it was also with me researching and studying and kind of having an understanding what I was getting into, because sometimes you can have a conversation with the CEO of a nonprofit because you think that's what you want to do, and when you really hear the challenges that they face, you're like, oh yeah, maybe not. So I think, always looking at, before you're about to make that pivot, make sure that it is a calculated risk, and you also tell yourself that it's okay. It's okay if you don't like what you're doing now and you want to try something else. There's nothing wrong with that. I think we get boxed into what society tells us we're supposed to do, and then we limit ourselves. And I think that I'm in a place now where I don't do that, and I don't believe that anyone should.
I think that we all pivot all the time. We have to distinguish pivoting by choice from pivoting because we have to, right? Personally and professionally. I mean, the first big pivot in my world, I was 19 years old, and my dad, who was my best friend, dropped dead of a heart attack. And it never even occurred to me that he wouldn't be in my world. I mean, I picked up the phone at 6 in the morning. My brother said, "No easy way to tell you this, Dad died, you gotta come home." And I vowed after that I would make my pivots by choice and hope never again to have pivots forced on me like that. So, that's a personal pivot, but professionally, as an entrepreneur, and I know Paul will agree, we pivot every day, multiple times a day, some by choice and some because we have to. I think it's a question of attitude. You got to look at pivoting as an opportunity. And if you're an entrepreneur, there's no such thing as no. It's just there's got to be a different way to do it. All right.
So I'm in the middle of a big pivot right now. And I'm originally from Minnesota. Yeah, you betcha, get it out of your system. It responds to me. I came here in January 2014. I'm also a nonprofit entrepreneur. I started my first nonprofit when I was 19. It's still there today. But stupid me, I thought, well, how different can Delaware really be? And Delaware's wonderful. And it's not that one is good and one is bad, but it is nothing like Minnesota. And I'm constantly having opportunities to be humbled. Lots of humility. The people are different. I had no idea how reliant I was on the connections I had developed over the years. But again, I came here and I saw an opportunity. One of the things I've said is I feel like I've been working on the effects of racism for over 20 years now. And this was the first time, if you know the YW, the first part of our mission is eliminating racism. And for that, and the wonderful folks of Delaware, I was willing to move across the country and take a huge risk.
Well, and I think change is good. So, if you think about what Al said, or what you've heard here, you got to embrace change. You got to love change. You got to attack change. You got to be ready to change. And if you get stagnant, you can't be an entrepreneur. You can't be successful unless you really come to grips with change. And that's the message you got to feel. And you got to be uncomfortable sometimes. I mean, you have to get yourself ready. And the outcome isn't the answer. Everyone tries to create the outcome. Well, the outcome's going to happen. But if you do the best you can, if you work as hard as you can, if you change and grow and move from Minnesota to Delaware, holy mackerel, that's crazy. But you have to embrace change. That was something that I just, you have to love it. You have to really want things to be better, and you have to make that happen. But don't worry about the outcome. The outcome's different than the work you're doing.